our hashtag for today, AFAL ambassadors. So, you know, in a sense, you know, what we represent here today are people that are leading into the future. And, you know, when we talk about like leading into the future, I put an image here of a social movement, because actually when you think about where we are now, the health and care system, you know, where we want to get to, actually the kind of thinking and approach that's like a social movement, I think is probably going to play a bigger part than some of the other ways that some other people are going about change. So let's talk about this. So one of my favourite albums in the whole world, okay, is Heroes by David Bowie. And you know, one of the things that he says, part of the lyric from Heroes, you know, tomorrow belongs to those who can hear it coming. And actually, I think, you know, the fact that we choose to come here today, you know, we're part of the community of people that can see tomorrow coming. So what I wanted to do first was just talk about, you know, what are some of the big trends in change. Now, in my job, I get to link up with people all over the world from a lot of different industries who are thinking about, you know, large-scale change and spread, you know, transformation. And what's interesting is that whoever you talk to and whatever industry or health system they're part of, people see the same trends. So what I want to do is I want to talk about 5 of the big trends that we see happening around health and care. So the first one is that right across the world, across multiple industries, change is becoming more disruptive, it's happening more quickly. So that many of the ways that we thought about change in the past, you know, around small-scale incremental change, it absolutely has its place, okay? And you know, we'll never create the kind of changes and improvements that we want for our patients and the people that we serve and families and so on if we don't have small-scale incremental change. But on its own, it isn't enough anymore, you know, because things are happening so quickly. And you know, just give you a couple of examples really. So, you know, if we think about the Japanese automotive industry, after World War II, Japanese car makers, Japanese electronics manufacturers, they had products that were far superior to what was being produced in other countries. But you know, it took 3 decades, it took 30 years for that to be realised and for them to take on the kind of global leadership role. Okay, you compare that with Uber, you know, in less than 5 years it's competing all around the world. And you know, we're moving into a different era now around how change happens. And you know, it's interesting, if you look at the health and care system and you look at many of the ways that our organisations are going about performance management, they're going about making change happen, it's actually the same things that we were doing 15, 20 years ago. And our world has changed massively, and yet we're stuck in you know, old ways. An absolute consequence of this is how we're going about change. And I mean, this comes from IBM. But you know, we're stuck in a world where we do these great big change programs, you know, 2 years, 3 years, 4 year massive change programs. And I think that's fine. But one of the problems is the world is changing so quickly that in 2 years or 3 years, it's going to be obsolete. So what you see now in organisations like IBM, instead we're moving to 30, 60, 90-day change projects. And again, and it's interesting, because like, you know, when I look on the Fab website, you know, it's full of stuff that is much more about 30, 60, 90-day innovation cycles or change cycles than big programs. The other thing that we see happening absolutely across the globe is the death of the pilot. And we're moving away from big pilot schemes to small-scale tests and prototypes. And again, you know, when we think about Fab stuff, you know, Fab stuff is much more of an era of rapid tests and prototypes and take something that somebody else has done and steal it and make it right for your organisation than it is part of an era of you know, of large-scale pilots. And again, you know, basically, if we actually look at the kind of history of pilots and spread in the NHS, you know, and the wider health and care system, it ain't a great history. Because very often we can pilot stuff in one place and it's, you know, some big complex thing and it works great, but then when we try and spread it to other places, it doesn't work, okay? So you know, we are part, if you like, of the vanguard of the era of testing and prototyping and doing things rapidly, you know, because we can do them quickly. They don't cost a lot. They don't need a lot of resources. They don't need a lot of data. They don't need a lot of looking after. The second thing that we see, you know, right across the world is what I'm calling here the acceleration of connectedness. You know, because we're part of a digital revolution. And basically what it means is that, you know, we can connect up with virtually anyone, anywhere in the world. And again, you know, when we think about many of the things that we're doing now, you know, we think about the fab movement, okay? You know, technologically, that couldn't have happened a few years ago, you know? And it's because we can connect and we can share and we can learn from each other. And, you know, every one of us can connect with virtually anyone, anywhere in the developed world.
Helen, can I just
Yeah.
yeah. Do you mind if we go back to just
Yeah,
before,
yeah, sure, that one.
The pilot versus
yeah.
versus
Yeah.
And it's that question at the bottom. What is the difference between a test and a pilot? Because I'm surrounded by a few people at the moment who just keep wanting to go down this pilot thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the pace up.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think it's a mindset, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But, so rather than just doing a pilot and rebadging it as a test,
Yeah.
what is the critical difference between the two?
I'd say one of the key differences is it links to that. You know, it's like, how can we, to 30, 60, 90 days, it's like, if we want to try something out, let's just try it out in a really small way. Let's prototype it, let's have a go at making it. And you know, but let's work in a way that's systematic and it's based on design principles.
So it's like the PDSA approach.
Yeah, it is like the PDSA approach, but with design thinking in as well. I think we're using a lot more simulation, prototyping, you know, that kind of methodology. And I'd say that, you know, one of the big capabilities that we need to be building moving forward is the kind of design skills that, you know, that enable us to work in that way.
Thanks.
Okay, no, it's great. It's really good that you asked. Okay, the third thing that we see happening across the world is that hierarchical power is diminishing. Okay, note I said diminishing, not diminished. Okay, it's a difference. Because, you see, when you think about, you know, the kind of organisations we work in are some of the most hierarchical organisations that you could possibly come across, okay? And what's interesting is that, like, these ways of organising, okay, they absolutely have their place, but they were designed for a different era. They were designed for an era when the kind of work that we did was very stable, you know, our jobs were very stable and were, you know, easy to replicate, easy to predict things. So it made sense, you know, to put people in these nice little boxes to manage the work. But in this era, you know, where people are connecting all over the place and change is happening so quickly, it just doesn't work as well anymore. So the person here at the top of the hierarchy can pull the lever and nothing happens because, you know, it doesn't work as well. Okay. The fourth thing that's happening, and I think, you know, fab stuff is absolutely part of this, globally, is the maker movement. And what we mean by that is, what we're seeing is like a renaissance all over the world of people having a go at doing things, you know, making things, do it yourself. You know, don't wait for somebody at the top of the system to tell you to do something. Just have a go, be creative, you know. And what's also happening, part of the reason for the maker movement is this connectedness. You know, people that are doing stuff, making stuff, are connecting and learning from each other. And, you know, just to show you a couple of examples. And this was something I was involved in a couple of weeks ago. Ollie and I were part of this, weren't we? We facilitated the Hammersmith and Fulham Healthy and Fit Hackathon a couple of weeks ago. And it was amazing because, do you know, Hammersmith and Fulham, year 6, which is 10 and 11-year-olds, 40% of the young people in Hammersmith and Fulham are either obese or seriously overweight, okay, at 10 and 11 years old. So instead of like saying, you know, let's have the public health professionals to come up with all the ideas, okay, let's get the local community in, let's get fast food owners, let's get young people, coders, designers, as well as health professionals, and getting everybody together, you know, making solutions together. Here's another example. This is Night Scout. This is so cool. Okay, this is a global project. It's just spread, you know, because of connectedness. You know, this is about actually seeing patients and families as experts, as makers, as collaborators. And basically what this was about was there was this guy who had a son with type 1 diabetes. And what he found was that when his child was going to school, okay, there was no way when his child was at school that they could do continuous glucose monitoring because there wasn't any mechanism for doing it. So he set up his own DIY project to do this, and allowing this real-time access to data. And it was DIY, it was open source because he's able to connect with loads of people, and look how it spread, all over the world. And like we're part of the maker movement, we're seeing loads and loads of fantastic frontline colleagues making great stuff, locally, not waiting for anyone to give them permission, getting on with it and making it and sharing it. And then the final thing that's happening, and we're all part of this movement, okay, is that change is moving to the edge. And what we mean by that is, if you look at what's happening in manufacturing, you look at what's happening in big pharma, okay, what we see is that research and development, innovation functions are moving from the middle of the organisation right out to the edge. And they're having to, because we're in this really fast-moving world, And if you're in the middle of the organisation, okay, you can't connect, you can't find out what the latest thinking is, or bring different and new ideas in. So in a sense, you've got to move out to the edge to learn basically and to connect, because that's where it's at for innovation. And I'm going to show you now an example from an organisation that has understood this and has moved to the edge. And that just makes me think, flipping heck, if this organisation's moved to the edge, then there really must be something in it, okay? And that is the Cabinet Office, okay? And I took this from the Cabinet Office website, the heart of British government. And basically what they've done is their policy innovation function used to be right in the middle of the Cabinet Office. And what they've recognised is that, in the kind of world that we're in at the moment, just being there in the middle ain't a good place to make radical change happen. So they've moved their policy innovation approach and team right out to the edge here. So in a sense, their policy innovators have got one foot in the organisation and one foot outside. And they're recognising that if we want radical policy solutions, we can't do it from there. We have to do it from there. But it's a very different model, because instead of having it done in the middle and then pushing it down on people, actually we're doing it there on the outside and pulling it in. And in a sense, like we as ambassadors are the people on the edge. Just the fact of this is a community of edge people here today. Because we're not just staying in our own organisations and in the middle and trying to find things out or trying to do stuff. We're actually positioning ourselves on the edge and bringing things in. Okay? And why is it so important to be on the edge? I love this quote from Barron. And you know what she says? If we lead from the edge, one foot in the organisation and one foot outside, bringing all these great ideas in, it brings us into contact with a far wider range of relationships, and this in turn increases our potential for diversity. Now, what's interesting again is if you look at a lot of the kind of commentators and thinkers and practitioners of new ways of doing things, this word diversity comes up so strongly. Okay, but it's beyond the way that we typically in the health and care system think about diversity. When we're thinking about diversity, often we're thinking about diversity and inclusion, which is really important. But when we think about diversity and inclusion, we're thinking about how can we have a workforce that reflects the wider population that we serve, or how can we make sure that everyone has a voice. What we're doing here is taking diversity much, much further. What we're saying is, how can we get really diverse voices and thinking into what we're doing? How can we get people with very different experiences, very different backgrounds? I think many of us live in a world. Every one of us here is a change agent. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. And we live in worlds where if you don't agree with the kind of the big approach that the organisation's taking, we get horrible labels put on us, like resistor or laggard or in denial. And actually, in this world, we need those things, because if we don't get that diversity, the world's not going to change. And we need diversity because it leads to more disruptive thinking, faster change and better outcomes. So, I think I'm going to just stop after this one for some conversation. I think it's very helpful to think about the relationship in our world between old power and new power. So let's talk about this, okay? Old power is like a currency, you know, a system of money. And the thing about money is that a few people have got it and most people haven't, you know? So it's like positional power. It's held by a few people in the organisation and it gets pushed down and we get commanded to do things, you know? You have to do this because it's a performance target, you know? You have to do this because we're getting ready for the inspection. You have to do this because it's the quality standard. And old power tends to work in closed organisations. And you know, like if we're doing, you know, we're working in an NHS organisation and we're doing a project with the local community, okay, we can't command the local community leaders to do anything, you know, they have to choose to work with us. So it's closed, it only goes to the edge of the organisation. And largely, old power is transactional and it's about holding people to account for mechanisms and processes. Let's contrast that with new power. You know, new power is like a current, it's an energy that you know, when lots of people come together with a common purpose. And we pull it into our organisations and our systems. And it's shared by lots of people. Like, you know, anybody who agrees with our goals, you know, who shares our purpose can come and be part of our movement. And, you know, the more people that engage in it, the more power we have. And it's open, you know, anybody can take part in it. And largely, new power is built on relationships, okay? Because the thing about new power is if we're engaging in it and we're building in it, everybody that's part of it is engaging because they want to, okay? Because they believe in it and it matters, not because they have to and anyone's forcing them. When we talk about it's about relationships, what's the most important part of that? I think it's trust. You know, because if we raise people's expectations and tell them things are going to happen, and then we don't follow through, people aren't going to engage again. And you know, we talk about the spirit of the volunteer, and you know, there's a real sense of that here this morning. We're the spirit of the volunteer. You know, we're all choosing to be here, actually in a great new power way. Now, what I'd say is that some of the people I interact with, you know, some of the futurists and the thinkers, they think that old power is dying. I don't think that old power is going to die in any healthcare system I know anytime soon. Okay? And in fact, you know, what we're seeing is in a lot of organisations and in our system, because of the very big challenges that we have at the moment, actually we're pushing old power even more. So, you know, we talk about having to get a management grip or how we're going to manage out the risks. So actually, how I see our world at the moment is one where old power is very strong, but increasingly this layer of new power is coming on the top, and I think we today are part of that. And you know, as change agents, ambassadors, we need to be able to operate in this very difficult, zigzaggy place in the middle. You know, we need to be working with both. So I'm just going to stop there for about 4 or 5 minutes and just say, have a chat on your table about your organisation or your system and what's happening with old power and new power. Okay? So have a little table talk.